Welcome back to I Speak Life. I'm your host, Jaquetta Daniels, and our topic for today is loneliness. And before we went to break, we were kind of talking about people judging us. But before we go into the judgmental piece, I wanted to say that's the whole point of this show. We were talking about sharing. And it's really so that people can come here, tell their testimonies and their stories, and people can see it and relate and say, you know what, someone else is going through what I went through. Because I find a lot of times when people get to a certain place in life, they don't share the old man anymore, and we certainly have to be mindful about doing that. But that's how we got delivered out of that, and we need to help someone else get delivered. So that's the whole purpose of I Speak Life. So when you touched on that, I just thought that was a great time to just kind of bring in the whole purpose of the show is to really, we want to speak life into someone else who's going through loneliness. We may not have totally conquered it because, as long as you're single, you may still deal with it. Even if you're married, you may still deal with it. But to know that you're not alone, that it's okay, and how to address it. So, please be forthright and honest and sharing your experiences. I certainly will be as well. But before we went to break, you were talking about sharing and then being judged by that. Did you want to go on a little further?
Yeah, I just want to say it makes you hesitant. It pushes you back into the isolation because you're saying, look, I have this problem, I wish I had someone to spend time with. Delight yourself in the Lord and give you desires. You see, a married woman's will is to her husband, but as a single woman, you're supposed to be spending your time praising God. And you're like, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? All I said was I would like to have someone to sit down at the table with and laugh with. And I personally don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think that, again, that's what God created male and female, for us to be mates together.
Have you ever heard that as far as if you shared your feelings of loneliness where people just kind of implied maybe you weren't being spiritual enough and maybe that you were delaying yourself?
Usually I premeditate their answer.
Okay.
And so it's like whenever I come with a problem, I always try to answer the question myself before
Okay.
I go to them. And
maybe we need to work on that.
If I know the person,
okay,
and I already got the gist of what they're going to say.
Because you know them enough.
And so if they're going to say, oh, you need to pray, I already know they're going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
So usually if I'm going to come out and try to overcome them with that, I say, well, look, I know I need to pray over this, but what do you feel? As a brother in Christ, should you help me, or are you just going to tell me the same thing? Yeah. And if you don't know, just be upfront.
Just say that. Well, a lot of times people do say, that's just a test, and we know that going in, we're spiritual enough to know. I know this is a test,
right.
But maybe I'm just trying to get it out, or maybe I'm needing someone to say, that's a valid thing that you're feeling.
Right.
When I was single, I went through that. Right. But a lot of times you're right. When people have gone through it and they arrived, nobody remembers nothing.
It's funny that you say that. My aunt was single for many years before she got married.
Mm-hmm.
And other people in the family made me feel like I was not living up to her standards.
She
did was just pray fast, read her Bible. She didn't get caught up in that stuff. And finally I said, you know what, I'm going to talk to her. I called her up and said, would you have lunch with me, Auntie? And she did. And when she said, no, I went through those things, it was like a breath of fresh air to say, okay, I'm not the only one.
Right.
Because people do need to know. And I think sometimes people who have been married for many years, my parents have been married for 30 years this coming August, and they married young, right out of high school. So my mom never experienced singleness because
Right.
my dad was always there. And then you have people who are just married. They're so caught up in the excitement of it all. They forget about what happens before. But if you've been single for a long time, for some reason, my aunt was able to remember and was able to share those feelings and those things that she went through. And I appreciate that.
Well, to be honest, I think everybody remembers. They may not want to go back there, or maybe they thinking that's showing a weakness in them to say, I used to do that. Okay. And I think that may be a part of the problem with anything. One person told me, actually one person told me it was Steve Harvey on a comedy show that he did, a Christian comedy show that he did. And he said, when they look at Christians, they don't think they can come up to the standard. It looks like you're perfect, you got it all together. They don't see and sometimes people don't relate to them like
Right.
they've ever been there.
Right.
It's like, this is where you need to get to now, but they don't say, oh, you know what, I went through the same thing. I was a single mom, or, you know, they don't share that testimony.
Right.
And so then they see it as unattainable.
Right.
And, you know, people look at me and say, oh, you used to do A, B, and C. I couldn't imagine. You know, and that's a good thing, but
Right.
that's why you need to remind people in a sense of helping them to, you know, draw them in, not as a way of you having flashbacks.
Reminiscing.
Reminiscing,
Woo.
exactly. So you have to be very careful in that. But we need to share with one another so that we know, say, oh, you know, when I was single, I did the same thing, but this is how it worked out for me, and I waited.
Right.
And I think that's the big piece I want to get to is waiting. About that when we be back. This is I Speak Life. We'll be right back. Thank you.